Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with writer and entertainer Michael Stangeland Jr. He recently published his first novel using a hybrid publishing service. He's written other projects as well, including a handful of other books, a script, and he's currently working on his next planned book with an ever-increasing number of potential projects just waiting to move from concept to page. All of this while surviving retail and being an in-home caretaker for his grandmother. Enjoy this story.
Well, Michael, it's great to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out. Where are you coming out of today?
I'm in Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
Okay, excellent. Well, I'm in Kansas City, Missouri, so
all right.
It's great to meet you. And I want to begin our conversation before we get into your writing and your novel. I want to start out with the global pandemic that we went through for the last 3.5 years. How did you make it through that time period, and how has it changed you?
I think for me, the question is a bit different than it might be for most people because I do live in South Dakota. And, South Dakota is, one of those standout states that it had minimum impact with all that went on. A lot of what was going on, I was more witnessing what was going on else places and being very thankful that where I'm living, we didn't face most of that. I think one big thing is that I go back to looking at everything that happened is a situation that I am in is that in 2016 or so, my grandma moved from where she had been living with my grandpa for I think nearly 60 years back to Sioux Falls because this is where I was living and this is kind of home for her. But, she's getting up in age and she wound up buying a new house here, moving here, and I've been living with her as kind of an in-home caretaker kind of thing. And one of the big things that went on with that is, even places where there was minimum changes, you still had medical places that were saying, places like nursing homes and all of that were set. And look, we want to keep, basically keeping old people locked away where, ostensibly for their safety, but how many of them were kind of isolated and, weren't able to see their loved ones and all that. But with my grandma, she was living right here. I was with her. And so, that really made me appreciate the situation that we had where she was living in a house she owned. I was living with her in a place where, my parents, they don't live too far away. So they could come, where she was in a very great situation. I'd say that's one of those really, one of the biggest things that came out of that is really appreciating, having my grandma in a place where she wasn't going through what so many other elderly people were going through.
So let's get to the heart and soul. I know you're a writer, but let's just get to the heart and soul of what you do on a daily basis. So I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third-grade students. It's career day. And one of the curious kids looks up and asks you, what do you do for a living? How would you answer that child?
Because the funny thing is that, whenever I get that question, it is for me a lot, I see it as a lot more complicated. It's probably a good thing you say, if you're in front of a bunch of third graders, because then I definitely need to simplify it. Because, I am a writer. I have a book published. I'm working on another one. I have a few others on standby that I've written in the past. But I am very much trying to make writing my career. Though when it comes to my day job, I actually work retail, which, I'm sure everyone can imagine, what they have their own visions of what it's like working in retail. But, it beats being a starving artist. But aside from that, I also have, I mentioned I live with my grandma, and it's kind of an in-home caretaker situation. And as my dad has put it, that is actually my most important job. So, it's kind of a mix of those things, so anytime someone asks, so what do you do for a living? I kind of laugh at it because I imagine they're thinking of just some kind of quick answer, but especially if I'm talking to adults, well, I imagine the answer is a lot more than they're expecting.
Absolutely. So when you were in the third grade, what was your dream? What did you want to be when you grew up? Was it always being a writer?
It's been gone a bit of a different ways, because I don't remember like when I changed my mind, but what I remember, like the very first thing that you're a child, people ask you, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? The very first thing that I can remember saying I wanted to be was an astronaut, actually. Now that actually thinking of, hey, this is what I want to do, that was kind of a short period of time, but kind of an important thing, because it's one of those kind of dreams that still lingers, even though I know it's never actually going to happen. Because one, when I'm saying this to my parents, it was pointed out to me, well, to be an astronaut, you need to be good at math. And unfortunately, math is one of my weak skills. But aside from that, there was the problem of when I'm this young child saying, I want to be an astronaut, I had a very different picture in my mind of what an astronaut is versus what the reality of an astronaut is. Because when I'm picturing, I want to be an astronaut, it's this kind of thing of like, one of those, I don't know how many people have ever done that project in school saying, one day I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do this when I grow up. And one of the things I listed in there is, one day I'm going to be the first person to step foot on another planet. Now, not in the sense of, hey, I'm going to beat anyone else to stepping on the planet. It's just there's a lot of planets out there, and someday I envisioned I'm going to be the first person to step foot on one of them. Not realize, I have this vision of, just science fiction portrayals of astronauts, not realizing that, it turns out that real life kind of restricts our ability to do that. We haven't even found a way to get to Mars yet. So it's one of those things where, there's definitely a divorce between what you want to achieve and what is realistically possible. So that was like the first thing I envisioned. And then from there, now writing was kind of always in the background at some point, but between astronaut and writer, I think the main thing that I looked at is that I wanted to be an actor. And I mean, that was a heavily focused. There was still some writing ideas that some kind of, I'm going to be a writer, maybe there's some mix there, but it was really in college that I finally solidified, yes, my focus is going to be on writing, on storytelling, on the crafting the story side of things.
So talk to me a little bit about where you were born and raised and some of the seeds that turned into you writing your book and being a writer and expressing yourself in the written word.
Well, growing up, a lot of my growing up, we moved a few times because, like, shortly after I was born, my father started seminary, so we moved from where I was born out in Washington, where I was only there for a few months that I would never remember. So then we moved like halfway across the country. So this is a major move, but a major move that I have no memory of. And then we kind of moved a few places as he kind of did that. And so those earliest years that I actually remember are my dad being in seminary, and then for the rest of growing up, and even now, my dad has been a pastor, and so that right there's definitely a strong religious influence in my life. But that was also related to that is that Sunday school or vacation Bible school kind of stuff is where I had my first experience of acting that got me interested in that and performance and, entertaining people through kind of a skit that I was in. But the writing, it's kind of hard to put more of a pin on because it's been kind of back and forth. Some of the, early on I got some ideas of, just basic stories. I had fun ideas in my head and I wanted to express them. I wrote a couple, quick, really simple, really quick stories that I called, one of them, what I remember, was called The Flying Trees, which was basically, I reimagined my family as like trees, but they could fly, and then I wrote a few things that they're basically fan fiction, but really quick fan fiction for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. But what really, the writing was always there on some level, just maybe not the primary focus, but what really got me to where I am now, like really got the ball rolling of, yes, I'm focusing on writing is, I don't know if you're familiar with the web series Red versus Blue, which was big kind of had some notability at one time. It's kind of died off more recently, but it's this thing where these people took a video game, popular video game, Halo, and they realized, hey, we can move the characters around in this, and it's basically a budget animation tool. We just move the characters around, we apply audio on top, and hey, we've got a series. And they managed to make it work because they managed to nail that writing. They managed to nail the jokes. And so somewhere in there I thought, I want to do this. So I wound up writing enough scripts that I could have in theory done my own a full season of that. But then came the problem of, okay, I've got this writing done, but now I have to figure out how to film it, and that never actually came to fruition. But it was but that right there was the important first step for actually, getting focused on, yes, this is where I'm going to focus what I'm actually working on. So from there, just general writing. I wrote some books. I wrote a script for what started out as a stage play that I actually did as a college, because my college, what I studied in college officially were theater and communication, and for my primary, that thesis or that final theater project, what I did was I took this script that I had written and I organized a stage reading for it. So from there, I've been focused on writing. So for the next few years, a lot of it was, just going through the general process of write this book, see if I can find a literary agent that's interested. Unfortunately, no one did, but I took approach, okay, they don't want this, I'll go work on the next one and repeat the process. And that's what I was doing for several years. And amid this, one of the books I wrote, which is the one I got published, called Junk World, The Ballad of Leroy Brown. This was a book that came out of it. One of the initial things was this online setting someone else had created about kind of a junk world planet where people dump bunch of machines and robots are trying to form their own life. And looking at this, I was kind of interested, so I created my own character to envision as being part of this setting. And where this character came from, the backstory for it came from a show that I really enjoyed, still really enjoy, that had recently restarted, which is BattleBots. If you don't know about that, it's people taking really, really complicated machines, really oftentimes expensive machines, but what they do is they put together these really well-engineered robots. They put them in a box, and then they have the robots try and destroy each other, which is, it's a really great time. I really enjoy it, and so that my enjoyment of that, and to a lesser degree, the movie Real Steel, just robots fighting each other, that proved a core to this character that I created. So that I took this character, I created my own version of this junk world planet that, both allows me to mold, make the world work as I need it to for the story, and so I don't have this problem of, well, I'm stealing this other person's setting that this person has created. And so I created this book, and I went through that process of, trying to find a literary agent. Nothing happened. And so for the time, I set it aside and thought, okay, because one of the things with these books that I write is, well, if I think they're good enough to send out, maybe I can go back to them later if I actually find some success. Well, later, as I said as I talked about early on, my situation currently is such that my grandma and I are currently living in the same house. I am, kind of an in-home caretaker. And my grandma, she noticed, she's aware of things I do, such as the writing. And so, seeing that I wasn't really going anywhere with it, she asked if there was she was asking questions about the process, trying to educate herself. And at a certain point, she asked, hey, is there anything I can do to help? And so with that, I eventually decided, with her support, that I'd go, okay, I can, if she is willing to help and she's willing to help me try and, make something happen with this, I decided that I would look at alternative publishing options. And so I looked around and I found it's called a hybrid publishing setup, where I don't know if all of them work the same way, but the one that I used, which is Beyond Publishing, it is very much a mix of, your standard publishing process and and self-publishing, where I had, where on the one hand, I had full say in how the thing came up, keeping in mind that, there are certain limitations, especially since this isn't a major publisher that has a bunch of resources, but I was able to give full approval to the cover. There was no editorial oversight of, hey, what's the final book going to be? And then a lot of what they took care of is the actual logistics of getting it published and making it available for people. But unlike what you often hear with standard self-publishers, one of those negative connotations that admittedly I don't know, I'm not going to say it doesn't happen, but I don't know which ones actually do that. So, but there wasn't any requirement that I purchase X number of books to make this, there wasn't some contractual requirement that I purchase X number of the books, and that's where it comes from. Where they do get their money is ultimately, hey, if these books sells, we get a small portion of it, and so now the process is, trying to get word of my book out, partially through things such as interviews such as this, and then there's also, focusing on the next book, getting the next book written so I can keep going.
So who's been a hero for you in your life?
Trying to think of which is a good direction to go with that, because hero can mean a lot of things, because people sometimes have heroes that they've never met. There's, heroes that are in your life, and so, I think a safe answer is to say my parents, because I think a lot of, there's, a lot of who I am and, making sure, I was on a good path in life and, picking up the right qualities come from, having good parents who raised me right, who did the right things raising me. So I think a good safe answer there is just to say my parents, my mom and dad.
So if you could meet anybody alive on the planet, whether it's a writer or anybody that's an inspiration, and you could spend some time with them, who would it be?
I'd say the number one person for that would be George Lucas, because he is one of those major influences on my life, not just because I am a major fan of Star Wars, but because I think that what is sometimes overlooked is that not given as much a focus, is that he basically lived the dream as far as, a creator goes, with so many stories you hear of people, they create these stories or they create these franchises, but they don't actually own them. They lose control. But up until he sold to Disney, he had full control. He had full control of his franchise. It was what he wanted it to be, but he was hugely successful with that. And yeah, and there's that, plus the fact, what he created. Again, it's the whole Star Wars universe. If I could meet one person alive who I might not otherwise get a chance, it would definitely be George Lucas.
So what is your motivation every day you wake up to create these stories to create these worlds? What is that for you? What motivates you to do that?
I think that the core of it is to create stories that people will enjoy, and that not just enjoy, but it will in some way, benefit other people's life. Like, when I have a book that is out there that someone reads, my hope is that when the person reads it, when that person is finished, that person will be able to say, yes, my life is better in some way for having read this. Not in so many words, but in a sense of, hey, I am thankful I read this. I enjoyed this. Or there's some part of this book that's making me think, that's making me have ideas that will allow me to improve my life. So I think at the core, it's being able to entertain people, being able to let people go on journeys or find some way to improve their life. And then with that, being able to envision these worlds, create these worlds, and show these worlds to people, and have them see what it is, and in some level, it's part of it is what any artist is looking for, is to express in a way that benefits other people. So,
of all of the things that you've done in your life so far, what are you the proudest of?
I feel like I should have a quicker answer for that, but it's actually something I haven't thought about a whole lot. I guess if I were to give an unconventional answer, the thing I'm most proud of, it hasn't actually come yet, and I'm keeping working towards it. I mean, I've got things I'm proud of. I'm proud I have this book out. I'm proud I've been, find ways to promote it. I'm proud that, the people, what feedback I have gotten from people has been, yes, I enjoyed this. And, some of the people have given me, science fiction isn't normally my genre, but I definitely enjoyed this book, even though it's a science fiction book, which tells me I've done some really positive things. I'd say I'm proud of what I'm doing, being able to, take care of my grandma as she's in her elder years of life. And so I'd say there's a number of things that I can say I'm proud of, but really that thing I can say I'm most proud of, I don't think I can really nail down any one thing at this point in my life.
So let's say you have a dream tonight. You run into like the senior in high school version of you, and you could give that young version of you a piece of advice based on the wisdom you've gained in your life. What advice would you dispense on that young version of you?
The funny thing is that I would actually hope that I wouldn't meet the younger version of my life, because this admittedly isn't a positive answer, probably something that's being looked for, but because this is one of those questions that I do think about sometimes, and what I come to is I can easily imagine that if current me and my younger me met each other, we would probably not get along, which in some ways is weird, but at the same time, it's like I look at who I used to be and seeing my younger person as I am, and there's definitely things in there where I definitely think I have improved in life, but there's definitely where my younger person looked at, envisioned where I'd be now, and I look at my younger self, and I'm thinking, I think it would actually be better if B and my younger self didn't meet, because I don't know if I would, because I'm not sure if the advice that I'd instinctively want to give my younger self would necessarily result in a healthy experience.
So everyone out there has a perception of you, family, friends, all of the readers of your stories, but ultimately you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Well, I'd say right now I'm someone who is definitely trying to get this writing going, trying to get the ball going, and someone who hopefully still has still has plenty of room to go up, but in a way that someone who is trying to achieve success, but avoid the pitfalls of letting success, paint me. Where I don't know if that makes sense, but in a sense of I'm trying to, complete these books, trying to, get people to know about these books, but trying to avoid that situation where if I do ever achieve that success, making sure I do so without turning into one of those people who, lets it get to their ego or lets that success consume them.
So, Michael, if anyone out there wants to get a hold of your writing, learn more about you, reach out to you, anything about your world, where can they go?
Well, I've got 3 things that I've got here for that. First, of course, there is Junk World, The Ballad of Leroy Brown. That's the book I wrote. It's a science fiction piece. I don't really have a website of my own, so I've been saying, hey, if you want to look this up, go to the website Goodreads. It has the information on the book, and it's also got links to various places where you can get a copy if you like what you see and you want to purchase a copy. And then if people want to hear more of things that I have to say, may hear more of my thoughts on certain things, I have a couple other shows that I am going to be appearing on in the near future. First being Stamper Cinema, how it works is the host, Andrew, guests come to him, they name a movie, he takes that movie, he watches that movie, and then the 2 people discuss that movie. That's estimated to be coming out either December 27th, 28th, give or take, and we're going to be discussing the 2006 movie Stranger Than Fiction, which appropriately enough has a heavy writing theme. It's a movie where Will Ferrell plays a character whose life is being narrated, and he's trying to figure that out. So I'm expecting there'll be a heavy emphasis on the literary angle. And then either at the end of the month or start of January, I'm going to be appearing on a podcast called Another Top 10 with Kyle White, which is where, the guests propose top 10 lists, and then then Kyle White and the guests put together their personal favorite top 10s for this topic and go through them. And for that, we're going to be having some fun discussing our top 10 favorite movie deaths. So that should be an interesting time, should be a fun time. So if they want to buy my book, they can go to Goodreads and look up Junk World, The Ballad of Leroy Brown, and find a place to purchase it from there. Otherwise, I've got those 2 shows I'm going to be appearing on, end of this month, start of next year.
Michael, thank you for your story. Thank you for your time. Best of luck with everything. I appreciate it.
Yes, and thank you very much for your time, for having me on your show and your questions and everything. Thank you, and you have a very good day.
Yes, sir. You too. Before we go, how do you pronounce your last name correctly?
It is pronounced Stangeland.
Just want to make sure. I don't want to ever assume anything. So,
well, yeah,
good deal.
It's a good thing you did that, because I do frequently have this problem where people who have it will find a way to insert an R somehow. I have no idea why it is. I've come to joking that I'm haunted by a very petty pirate. But no, it's very good because there are a lot of people that find ways. I mean, not intentionally, of course, but find ways to get that name mixed up in ways that I would not expect. So.
Absolutely. I wanted to make sure not to do that. Michael, thank you again, sir. Have a great holiday season.
Yes, you too. Thank you again. You have a good rest of the year, and hopefully the next year is good for you too.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, business, spirituality, music, and more from around the globe. Our esteemed theme music was composed and produced by the great E.E. Pointer of Kansas City's River Cow Orchestra. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. You can also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.